I'm going to ask the people, the members of the task force, to just introduce yourselves by name, since I turned all the name tags so I could read them, not so they could read them. I'm Diane Mikulis. I'm the chair of the APFO Review Task Force.
I'm Cole Schnorth, the vice chair.
Karen Lasher.
Dave Grabowski.
Stu Cotton.
Sharon Lee Vogel.
John Stark.
Jeff Brano.
Frank Willis.
Heidi Gash.
Paul Rafale.
Lisa Martin.
Rick Wilson.
Richard Freeze. Bruce Harvey.
Carl DiLorenzo, staff.
And Andy. Ryan. And Grace has just joined us, with those of you on the task force. Grace is taking Phil's place, who got promoted. So she'll be helping us with all, everything that's going on. This is kind of a different meeting. The last 6 meetings we've had, I guess, have been very much educational in nature. We've had presenters, talk to us, and then we, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, tell on the phone. Yes, who's on the phone?
How about Kevin the phone?
Oops.
This is Reginald Avery.
Reg, Diane, and who else?
Marianne Brackney.
Mary. Thank you. Can you guys hear us okay?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so this, the purpose of this meeting is actually to think about what we have learned over the last couple of months, talk about what we want to do for the next couple of months. Do we need more speakers to come in? Do we have more questions? And also to start getting ideas as to what are we concerned about within APFO, what might we want to consider changing, so that we're getting ourselves down the road to our final goal, which is coming up with recommendations for possible changes to APFO based on our perspectives as a diverse group of citizens here. So the first thing we're going to do today is look at the meeting summary from last time. Did anybody have any changes to that?
I move it be approved.
Okay, anybody else?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, probably the most important thing on this is the dates. Hopefully everybody's got this all on their calendar, the dates for the next couple of months, several months worth of meetings. Maybe the end, maybe not, but I'm sure. We did have some questions submitted. The roads test was of a lot of interest, and I know Mark's here. Chad, is Chad here? Oh, there we go. I'm sorry, I couldn't see it. I'm Rick. So I'm going to read the questions, and and the answers, and you guys will get these. I apologize, I just saw them the first time now, so everybody has the answers to the questions. But I wanted to ask Chad if the county had ever looked back at traffic growth to see if the 6% long-term growth in background traffic required to be built into traffic studies proved to be accurate. The 6% growth factor results in doubling of traffic every 12 years on top of counting all approved but unbuilt projects in the area and the specified project for which approval is sought. My impression is the 6% growth rate would overstate the growth that will actually occur. And the answer on here is, we receive historical data within road studies for both long and short-term studies, and I cannot recall ever seeing annual percent increases reaching 6%. Typical historical percent increases on existing state or county roads are in the range of 1 to 3%. Did anybody have any other questions on that, or any comments from either of you?
Well, I asked a question, so I can ask a
Okay.
follow-up. If you've experienced 1 to 3%, why do we still use 6% then? And the 1 to 3 would also include the specific projects that the studies are including in addition to the 6% background growth. So why do we keep it at 6%?
I don't know the answer why we kept it at 6. I guess we're just being conservative, looking out into the future, not knowing what's coming in the area.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, the next question was, and this might have been yours too, Cole. I think that some questions were raised about how the county coordinates road improvements with the state. Zoning tends to approve projects based on the best case scenarios, yet at the meeting, Mark said that at times we literally cancel road projects due to lack of funding that's supplied by the state. The county monies are there, but not the state. Who would address how zoning can handle these types of setbacks and how we can accurately plan for adequate roads for projects coming online, and especially projects that are trading up for more density by offering only parts of road improvements? That may never happen. Would that be the new zoning director? And this came from Chad. It says,
That's my question.
oh, that was yours, okay, I'm sorry. The answer I've got here is, wait, the page 2 thing. Page 2, how was 1450 to 1600 critical lane volume established? Should it be revised? The answer is the range of trips stated above corresponds to accepted level of services as part of the critical lane volume procedures. The county's current highest passing level of service is D, maximum 1450 trips, which provides for one level of service buffer before the intersection reaches its capacity. This level of service means that the intersection is functioning at a level over 90%, but less than 100%. Intersections designed to operate at this level of service are operating at an efficient level with little to no delay, clearing the waiting traffic within each cycle. In contrast, intersections controlled by state highway are not considered failed by the state until they reach level of service F, minimum 1,600 trips. Improvements for these intersections are controlled by the state review process. Anything else on that, Diane? Any follow-up?
That doesn't really answer the question though, because the question was what happened like on 29, we waited for the improvements to happen that we were promised. So no, I need more clarification on that, because we are allowing projects to go forward with state promised projects for 10 years down the line, and that leaves the neighborhood 10 years in the red.
Mark, you want to
So I'd
address?
like to
Yeah.
continue that.
Mark's going to address it, Diane, thank you.
Let's all have to sit here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think the first question was basically Diane's question, and that was state projects or projects that were cost sharing with the state. And I mentioned in the last meeting where the state didn't have their portion of the money, the county was able to put up their cost share portion, but the state couldn't and the projects couldn't move forward. And it sounds like from the question that's being asked, it makes it sound as though, is this a planning and zoning issue? Should it affect, and I think the underlying question is, should it affect future developments in an area? But, so, I want to zero in on the context of the answer, and the answer really applied to, there are many shared projects with the state where they haven't had the money to put forward so they could move forward. They weren't necessarily a function of development. So it wasn't necessarily something that happened where developers came in and areas were being overdeveloped. What I was talking about was, and specifically talked about St. John's Lane, was that there are many state facilities because of pass-through traffic that's being generated or originating out of, say, Frederick County or Carroll County. And they have a commute that's taking them through Howard County. They might be using I-70, they might be using 29. And when those roads, which really doesn't have anything to do with the development process in the county, okay? It has to do with the transportation assessments in the county, but not necessarily development. Because that's not the local contributor. It's this regional growth in traffic from policies of development in Carroll County or policies of development in Frederick, where they are commuting to the airport or Baltimore City or Baltimore County or NSA or some of the larger employers we have in the area, and they have to pass through Howard County. So it taxes our road system and those roads specifically. And so Public Works and State Highway Administration work together trying to address some of those problems. And we haven't had the resources to address a lot of those regional problems. And so that was the context of what I was talking about at that time. Now the other part about the 1450 and 1600, I don't know, I think that was a separate question.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, there was a separate part about, like on 103, when we added new development and allowed them to double the development, but we're depending on a state road project that they're giving just a portion of. That was the other half of that question.
Okay,
We doubled density on a project that had already been put in.
right.
I mean, it had already been approved as tax density, so we doubled it on a promise.
So what I have to kick it over to you, because a development on 103 would be responsible for making the improvements on 103 that would be necessary if any of the intersections failed or if there was any infrastructure that failed, they would be on the hook for those improvements. And I don't know whether, I believe the state requires that the developer bond those projects, and maybe someone here would know better, that they're at least bonded initially, and then the bond is released as they start the construction. And I know there can be times when there might be a lag in the frontage improvements for some very specific reason, usually a very good reason, where the developer can't move forward. They might be waiting for approvals or design or something else that's, and so, but we may not be holding them back on road improvements, letting their development move forward, knowing that they are committed to those road improvement once whatever obstacle is overcome. And I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, as far as bonding, yes, with the approval of the construction drawings, they have to bond whatever improvements are proposed for APFO. If it is a state intersection, we take it, we hold it until we know that they've now bonded also with state, and at that point we then release it because it's bonded with the state. And either we or they at any given time have the money to get it done. It's then, because of if there is some kind of a lag, then we have to pull the trigger and somebody has to go build it, whether it's the county or the state has to go build that improvement if the developer defaults on it. I'm not speaking specifically about something on Maryland 103, I'm speaking on the process in general.
Okay, the next one is, who is the traffic consultant regarding proposed developments? Is the consultant hired by the developer, or is it performed by the county? Is the consultant, I'm sorry. What recourse do citizens have if they disagree with the analysis? And the answer here is traffic consultants are typically local companies that certify the work as professional engineers. They are hired by the developer, as are the site engineer, architect, and geotechnical engineer. Citizens could hire their own professional engineers to dispute the findings. I'm not sure who asked that, and if that is the answer that you wanted. I mean, not that you wanted. That answers the question. Sorry. Okay, page 1, purpose statement, first bullet. This refers to the presentation, and I don't have that in front of me. Does the county take into account not only the proposed development, but other planned developments within the area? If no, why not? The answer was yes. These developments are part of the background traffic. See the presentation section titled Traffic Volumes Counted in Study. And we all have this. Next question, how long can a project be deferred until someone else fixes the road? The answer is, to be relieved of responsibility, projects would have to be considered void from the development process to require another development to fix the road. If the development is still considered in the development process and a second development fails the same intersection, whichever development completes the agreement process first, fixes the road. The other option is that the two developments share the cost of the fix. And then there was another question here that was an answer to. Oh, Mark didn't answer them. Okay. All right. Page 2. What actions are taken if the 5-year findings are negative?
Well, what I assume that means is that that there's some failing intersections, or how I would actually interpret that question is that our findings with the 5-year study are one set of data, and then the developer came back and was showing other data. So the way that the downtown APFO is written is that they have to use our data. They have to use our data. So in that particular case, it's not the consultant data, it's our data.
Okay, and then the last one is, do you think that any proposed development having any state roads requiring improvements should be funded prior to the approval of the project? If no, why not? Any proposed development having any state roads requiring improvements?
For local projects, they are funded. I mean, we have intersections that are county, state intersections, and as I said a couple moments ago, development comes in, we take the bond until the state then executes an agreement and a bond with them. So the developer does fund that job. So all, those projects are funded.
What do you consider, what do you consider local? Local, you said local projects. What's that mean?
If I said projects, I meant to say intersections. So if you have an intersection that's Route 40, which is a state, along with it, that intersects a county road, the state gets the final say on what the improvement will be, an acceptable improvement will be, but the developer is on the hook for making that improvement. So that's why we take the bond first, finish the process, then the state takes over.
Let me throw something out to the audience. I mentioned probably, I think the second meeting we had, that I was involved in Maple Lawn and 216 relocation. And the one thing that was done on Maple Lawn was that that project was actually delayed for a year because the state road was not funded at all. So the deal was made whereby the state road had to be funded before the first shovel had to be put in the ground. What do you all think about that? Is that
Well,
I'm not part of this
I
committee,
remember-
you can ask them though.
I remember that, and I worked in engineering at the time, and so it was the interchanges, because the interchanges were not adequate. It was just a bridge over time. And because of the density going into Maple Lawn, they needed these interchanges. And the way the APFO is written, it says that when the traffic study shows that there needs to be a grade separated interchange or intersection or whatever, meaning an interchange, you know, a ramp or a bridge, that the developer doesn't have to, at that point, the developer doesn't have to, it's written awkwardly, but he doesn't have to fund the whole thing, okay? So what happened was, they went to state highway. They went to the county, and together the county and the developer went to state highway. And it was a three-way partnership and cost share on the construction of the interchanges. And then part of that deal was, you know, they couldn't build the development until they were substantially complete on the interchanges. It was 216 and Johns Hopkins.
I thought it was the funding had to be there.
Yeah, but, yeah, you might be right. It was either the funding or the actual
The funding.
construction had to be there. And so, in the downtown, but if you read the APFO of the regular APFO, not the downtown APFO, it's somewhat, the language could have been improved to do that. So when we had the opportunity for the downtown APFO, we tried to strengthen that language. Because not only was it a matter of funding, but we wanted timing to also be considered. So we didn't want major portions that would generate a lot of traffic to be constructed without the infrastructure being actually constructed. Not only do they have to have a major facilities agreement, and that's what they call it in APFO, not only do they have to have the agreement, but they have to be on schedule for construction. So the monies have to be in place, and it has to be essentially a shovel-ready project, essentially, so that as the development is moving forward, there is some road improvement, major road improvement going on at the same time.
Is this only interchanges?
Yes. Grade separated, yeah, it's
So
only written
See,
that way.
my way of thinking would be any development that has a state road as part of the development, and the state road is not funded, then you should not be able to build until we have it at least minimum of funded. What's your opinion on that? Maybe I shouldn't have asked.
Well, the way the APFO works now is the way the Chad explained, is that on those types of projects where it might be, you know, the first intersection and maybe a through lane needs to be put into the road, and a signal needs to be placed, or all of the above, right? Would be part of the APFO improvement plan that the developer would be on the hook for. And so the state takes, so they have to design it, that developer has to design that. And the state, like Chad was saying before, the state takes a bond. And they have a process, that the access permit process. And so the state takes a bond for a short period of time, which is binding the developer and to make those improvements at some time. And if he defaults on the project, or if he defaults in any way on making the improvements, but moving forward with the project, then the bond is in place. It would be a defaulted bond. We contact a surety, get the money, and someone would build the job, whether we hire our own contractor or the state hires theirs or whatever. The issue that I believe we run into the majority of the time is that, and not all the time, but many times I think, and it's people's perception, is that the improvements on the road don't keep pace with the construction that's happening. And it's the developer that's responsible for that. And I think that we don't have a mechanism in like the general county where we're tying the improvement on the street that they're bonded to make, tying it to the actual construction that they're moving forward with. So sometimes they can finish construction and not finish maybe widening the road or something like that.
Is this county different than other counties in that regard, such as Montgomery?
Well, Montgomery, I would always hold up as like somewhat of a special animal because of the urban areas and the variety of plans that they have and how they go about it. But in Montgomery, in the more urban areas, and actually Val may be able to answer this better,
That's why I asked the
but they try their best to, by phasing projects, they try their best to make sure that the infrastructure is in place as phases progress. In fact, we actually copied, when we were doing the downtown APFO, we had people from Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning come in and talk to us about Bethesda and Rockville and other areas of Montgomery that are fairly urban, and how they're matching up road improvements to the actual developments. And so we did try and build that into the downtown APFO. But I think, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot. Probably.
You know, I'll give you a couple of examples of tie barring phasing with development improvements. I'll use a different form of transportation. In this case, I'll talk about transit. I worked on 4 of the Purple Line station areas. And so as part of the planning process, we looked at phasing in development. So we had it set up in a way that there was a certain level of development pre-Purple Line, and then another level that permitted greater intensity of development post-Purple Line. So the idea was that, look, the development can proceed. There may be surface street improvements that need to be tied to the initial phase of development. But in order to proceed with the maximum permitted density, the Purple Line didn't have to be constructed yet, but it had to be, it had to have gone through the funding process. So there was a guarantee that that improvement was in place. So, and there was quite a bit of debate on that topic. Should it be tied to the funding, or should it be tied to the first shovel is now into the ground, and is that the trigger point? So through the ultimate county council decision, it was that the Purple Line would have to, the funding for the Purple Line had to be in place. And you could take and extrapolate that to include, you know, various roadway improvements as well. So I think the critical is the tie between the phasing and the improvements. And then the question is, okay, is it under construction, or is it funding, or, you know, what is the continuum that you would look at?
Yeah.
Putting this together with Diane's point, I mean, it's exactly what she was saying. She was saying that even though it was funded, it's not progressing, and by the time the development's done, the funding's not enough. And wasn't 216, wasn't that the problem, that by the time they had the engineering plan, the development had grown so much that they needed to enlarge it? Like, I had heard that the original plan and the original funding wasn't enough, and they had to go back to the drawing board, add a few more lanes, turning lanes. The bridge was bigger,
Yeah, no, I don't know that, you know.
because that's kind of what I was picking up on what Diane was saying, was that we allowed them to start, the funding was there, so they were permitted, but then we get overdeveloped and the funding's not catching up to start the project, and then the traffic's already on the roads.
I think the critical question there is it the traffic that's generated by the development? I'll use another Montgomery County issue, is that, you know, in some of the planning areas that I was working, if you look at the intersection capacities right now, they're not optimal, I guess is the best way to put it. But if you look at what is causing that, it was kind of interesting because folks in Montgomery County point to all those bad folks in Howard County who are, you know, driving through Montgomery County to get to where they work in DC. And so you have a lot of through traffic. And so the question is, given that background traffic and the growth in background traffic, is it a developer's responsibility to accommodate traffic coming from the outside? And as Mark said, you know, is that part of the equation or not? Or do you purely look at it from the standpoint of what is the development itself contributing to congestion?
And as you think through this further, keep in mind there's basically two types of projects. There's a project that's not phased, so it all gets done at one time, and then there are larger projects that could have multiple phases. Currently, multiple phases, we analyze the trips based on each phase. So when you get to phase 3 of a job and an intersection fails, then it's programmed in that you would then fix that intersection. Then you get to the 4th phase, a different intersection fails, it's programmed in to fix that one. So it is programmed in on a phase-by-phase basis. On let's call it a smaller job that's done all in one phase, there isn't that second trigger, that mechanism. You go out and you build, we take the bond for the improvement, we hold it, and they don't get it back until they do the improvement, but the developer is waiting to get his project underway, maybe completed, before he finishes the other improvement. That's a choice they're making. We're holding that bond, making sure it gets done though. I'm just saying that's kind of how it works, so keep in mind whether it's a phase project or a single phase job.
Can you give a capacity idea of what the difference is between a single phase and a multi-phase?
I'll go with subdivisions. You know, you could have, and it will vary a lot. It could be something as small as a 10-lot subdivision, 10 homes. Or it could be Maple Lawn Farms that is programmed in, started in the year, I think it was 2000, phased out to 2015. Things got adjusted during the downturn in 2008, 2009, and they pushed everything out another year. But that could be a
was a
very,
multi-phase, but a 10-house subdeveloped maybe one phase?
would almost always be a single phase, yeah.
Anything else on roads?
Could you clarify again, I don't have the APFO rules in front of me, but on the grade separation requirements, I
I have a
heard.
question.
Oh, well, hold on, Diane, Brent started one, we'll get right back to you.
I heard in one hearing that grade separation requirements are exempt, or is that only partially true? Because what I saw in that example you were just describing was somebody did make contributions, but were they required to, or was it nicety?
Well, the language could be improved a little bit, but all the improvements made on a roadway that will need to be made on a roadway are typically the responsibility of the developer who's essentially impacting the road. So they're being asked to, within certain parameters, like, how many intersections out and all that kind of stuff. But the direct impact from their development onto the roads are their responsibility, and so then they have to fix that. And that's all the at-grade stuff. Traffic signals, turn lanes, lane widening, that kind of stuff. Deceleration, acceleration lanes. But then when you get to grade-separated roadways, where they need to put in a ramp and a bridge that goes over to their development, because it's the only way they can do it, that's what the traffic study is indicating. And a good example of that is Stevens Road and 216. There's a ramp, I think it's Stevens Road, it's a ramp off of 216 heading towards Laurel, and then it's a bridge, and then it goes over to a business park. And it was, at one time, it was, the developer for that, it was only one developer for that business park. Right, Emerson. So, then they needed that grade separation for what they were going to do with their development that they were planning. So the way the APFO is written is that they're not 100% responsible for that ramp and that bridge to go over, okay? And you can question, well, why not,
Is
and all
that
that.
proportionate?
Well, then they have to sit down at the table, and I think a lot of it is control, and with the state highway and with the county, when you're talking about major roads like that, that they want to have control. So I think really that may be the rationale for it, where they say, no, developer, you're not 100% responsible for that. You have to come to us, and we'll have to go into a major facilities agreement, and we'll work out the shares of, who pays for what, and who's going to maintain it, and then how everyone is reimbursed. It's a contract. And then, and so that's the way it occurs.
So
Now, there
it's
isn't
required, but percentages may vary.
They may, because it's all part of and I believe this is true, they may vary. There's no hard and fast, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Although you probably, if you sat down with the state, they would probably say, we're only paying 1/5. And that's where you start. So you're not starting on equal footing. But you're starting at some negotiating point.
I wanted some clarification. I mean, if you're only contributing 10%, you should only have to owe 10%. But if it's not required whatsoever, you may contribute 0%. So that's what I wanted to see, whether there is at grade separations contributions relative to the amount of impact.
So there's another part of APFO that says that, so it was through their traffic study, the developer's traffic study, that said that they needed that grade separation. So if the developer said, well, I'm not gonna, there's no way. I'll go into this major facilities agreement, but I'm not paying a penny. And there's no real good reason why they're not paying a penny, and they can't compensate, or there's no compensation at all for the money that someone else, some other entity might be outlaying. Well, then they can't, there's another part of APFO that says, well, you can't build a project. Until you can come to that major facilities agreement and all parties agree, then that project there's like 3 or 4 things. You either downsize the scope, you defer it, or a couple other things. I don't know if you know them off the top of your head, but the ones that stick out in my mind are you either downsize your project where you can do an at-grade intersection, or you just defer your project. It's not going to go through the county until you can come up with the facilities agreement. So,
Could you follow up by referencing those line items later on for our task force for that particular component?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
And then, back to the phone. Question?
No, not for me.
Diane,
Go ahead.
Diane, when we were talking about the awkward look we had, it got fixed in downtown project. Can we put that in there to maybe look at fixing that for the rest of the APFO?
Oh, put that on our list.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
And then, and also you were asking about the developers being responsible. If the traffic is here, no matter where it comes from, I don't care if it comes from another county or not, the developers got to be responsible for the new impacts to the roads, because if we're already full, and this is the level that we have, it doesn't matter where it's coming from, it's already here. So we have to deal with it in order to satisfy the citizens that actually live here, would be my comment on that one.
Maybe we should tax people who have extra cars in their driveway.
I'm not driving.
Doug, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mark, if I heard you correctly, the last presentation, you said downtown Columbia now has an alternative transportation test, meaning pedestrians and bikes before things are approved, is that correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, an alternative, well, yeah,
It's not just cars you're looking at, it's also
Right, not
pedestrian
just
traffic,
cars.
site traffic.
right, addition.
Additional, not alternative, okay. Can you clarify a little bit what those specific components are? And maybe speculating, how realistic would it be to replicate some of that language for other parts of the county? Not necessarily all the county, but expand some of that.
Well, without getting too far in the weeds as to actually how they calculate bicycle level of service or pedestrian level of service, which is kind of, is still evolving in how they actually determine that. But the concept is that, you're building a community where you need alternative modes of transportation so that people can walk around, people can bike, people may be able to take a trolley, people may be able to, or transit. So what we put into the new APFO was that, which is not done anywhere else in the county, is that they needed to have a bicycle level of service. So we outlined, okay, this is important, and because it's important, we feel it's important, so you need to have a bicycle level of service. So if you put a new building in, then you have to look around the perimeter of your building. Of course, there is this general bicycle plan, it's very skeletal, okay, that's already in place, and the county made sure that that got in place. But then as new development comes in, as new blocks form and new roads are created, that they have to see how they connect to this skeletal bike system that's already in place, and at what level of service. Like, it's not going to be, so essentially, just, in real layman's terms, it's not going to be really crappy. You're not just going to stick something in there, so that there's some quantification of the level of service that you'd be able to provide. And that could be bikes, it should be bikes and pedestrians. But then I also noted that, that those two things can be in conflict with one another. So bikes and peds can be in conflict, and then a decision has to be made, well, which level of service do you want improved? And that's very context sensitive, okay? Where is the building in terms of everything else? And so when you go to, so what I would advise is when you go and think about maybe other parts of the county where this might be, where you might want to see it happen and where it might be applicable. I mean, you really have to think about the density and whether you could actually generate pedestrian traffic, whether you could actually generate bicycles, because it costs money to do that. So you're building infrastructure someplace that maybe, really can't support it because the density is not there. So they're the kinds of things, when you're looking at the density of the downtown, you don't want someone to get into their car who might be at the Warfields and drive down to the lakefront. There should be some alternate, because you don't want that car on the street at all. You want to park once and walk around. And so you want those alternate forms, or alternate modes of transportation to be available to people that are walking, so that the internal trips in that cordon line that we talked about. So when you're inside there, you should be able to park at one place and then maybe never have to go back to your car again until you want to leave the cordon line. Okay? So that's the idea. So when you think about it in other areas, you need to have a good bit of density. That's not to say that missing pieces of sidewalk shouldn't be placed, or that bike lanes, or like a bike master plan or bike lanes shouldn't still be pursued, because there are things you can do in a more suburban setting to help bikes and peds, but not to the intensity with bicycle level of service and all that that we got into the downtown. It's a really long answer, I apologize.
Yeah, good, thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
No, she wants to.
She wants to
Speak.
she wants to-
Congratulations.
It was a long.
Okay, we're gonna move on, and then I realize I left out an item which we will,
Diane, really quick, one thing I heard from here that I think might be a point to write down, or at least note, that was key from what I heard, was the concept of timing, of whether a decision point, decision needs to be made, or further discussion on. Sounds like the downtown APFO was strengthened because of the realization of the issue of the timing, and that is the timing of, do the improvements need to be made upon funding or upon when the construction is, the shovel in the ground concept. I thought that was a key point that either the committee should come back to talk further, to get more information on, or, to match the APFO, between the downtown Columbia and the regular.
Okay, we're gonna move to the potential speakers and topics list, and this literally I just copied and pasted from what people had emailed me. I think what we want to do is maybe go walk through these so we understand what they are, and then get a sense of the group as to which ones do we really want to do, because the longer, the more speakers we have come in, the longer we're delaying our actual deliberations on recommendations for APFO. Not that that's not worth doing, but just so we all agree that that's how we want to proceed. We do have 6 meetings scheduled in the fall, going up through November 18th. And like you said, we would love for that to be the last meeting, but it may not be. So if you all remember who gave me these suggestions, because I don't, maybe you can speak to them if they need some explanation. The first bullet is major provisions of other APFOs. And I think we were talking about Maryland, surrounding locations, Montgomery County being one, obviously. And maybe there are other locales that are similar to Howard County in other states, neighboring states, or maybe even far away. And people think that's a good thing to do. What other kinds, what tests they use, what their major provisions are, not necessarily that we're gonna read the ordinances from each one of these. And I guess the question would be, who would be a good person to present that?
I think one of the documents that we were given in the beginning is pretty good. And it had some good charts in there that kind of showed a lot of the major aspects in the other counties and compare them. You could compare them and contrast each of the major bullets of that already. So, I mean,
Do you think that's enough?
we all kind of promised to
To
actually
read
read
it?
that and digest it and look at it. We may be able to avoid having to have a whole other educational meeting about it.
It's a call job, isn't it? Like take all of them and compare them for us.
We started a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Actually, no, we started that kind of spreadsheet.
Yeah, we were to simplify it.
There are 3 documents on the website now that are really valuable that I think Carl put up. They're the models and guidelines of APFOs, the report by the APFO work group from the Maryland Sustainable Growth Commission, and APFO inventory for Maryland jurisdiction.
I think that's the one I'm trying.
So there's a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
You gotta read through it, but.
So do we think that we already have that information?
I think
We just
we
need to
have.
make an effort. Okay, so that's not
Well,
good.
there's one speaker I'd like to hear.
Go ahead.
Val?
So
Would you come
good,
forward,
this is a
sir?
perfect opportunity
Would you
for
come
me to
forward?
comment.
Yeah, does everybody know about, we've introduced you before, I think.
Yes, yeah. So, similar to the first heading that you have up there, I'm always happy to talk to anybody, but what is it that you want me to talk about? And I think that's the critical question here is, I've read through the report that was written about APF in the state of Maryland, but there are so many topics in there. And I think it would be beneficial if, and again, this is your meeting, but I think it would be beneficial if you had a discussion that would allow us to research more specific questions that you have, because otherwise, I'm just trying to avoid coming back and say, well, here's what the report says. So I think it would be helpful if you could provide a little bit of guidance for us so that we can hone in on some topics, answer some specific questions that you all have. Otherwise, I'll come in and talk about my vacation.
Okay, Stu and then Joel.
Yeah, what I would like to hear from you, Val, is 2 things. First thing is, how does Montgomery County differ, and Mark was indicating that, differ from Howard? Is it good or is it bad? Now, I know you've only been here 7 weeks.
Well, could you expand? I don't know what you mean by good or bad. How
Well,
is it different?
How does it reflect on the citizens? I mean, how does it reflect on growth? I'm concerned here, been for years, quality of life issues. I know that, and that's my second point. I know that in Montgomery County, one of the categories that Montgomery looks at, for what it's worth, is health. It's the only, I think it's the only county of the 14 that are listed in the book that actually do health. I don't know to what degree they do health, but I am very interested in that, big time. Because we've got major problems. I mean, Lowell Hospital is closing up their full service.
So when you say health, do you mean, because there are different topics, because there's a healthy communities approach that looks at things like the provision of choice for transit, sidewalks, bikeways. Is that the kind of health?
No, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested, I haven't looked at Montgomery County's categories for health. What are they looking at in health?
I would like to add to Stu, in general categories going down to APFO, what the DPZ's future policy directions or initiatives are going to be as they relate to this. So if you have a policy that you want to create green space, how is APFO as it stands allowing you to meet that goal, or how is it falling short?
Okay, well, hopefully that policy discussion comes out of this group, what's important to you, and how can we react to the kinds of things that you identify and how other communities have looked at them. I mean, our policies are driven by the things that are within our master plans, that have the endorsement of our elected officials, our appointed officials, who are representative of the citizens of Howard County. So hopefully this discussion begins to identify what are some of the key policy things that you think are important as part of the APF.
Yeah, maybe we need a few free swims before the next lesson. We have topics we can work on, we can talk about. Maybe that'll generate the need for another speaker, or like you were saying, you hear more, and then you can think, oh yeah, I got the right person in mind that should come and speak,
Diane, I'd like to see something, I'd like to hear the Office of Transportation come and talk about sidewalks and pedestrians and transit planning. Because the thing about Howard County, we can't change the past and the fact that we need to be connected and we're not connected. We can't change the past, but we can do something about the future. And we can't build our way out of the congestion we have. So let's hear about ways to change what that future is. Because without that, what are we doing here?
And that's my problem, is there's so many things that are on the table, that if we could take the things off the table that are all working and concentrate on the things that need improving, then we'd know who to ask and what questions, because there are a lot of things that work. So if we could take that off, I wouldn't have to read so much. Because if it's not broken, we don't have to fix it, and that agreement, I almost think that that's the heading of this committee, would be go to where we have that consensus, as you said in the first night. Where do we agree that things are working? Take that off the table, and then we can concentrate. Because right now, there's so much information out there that isn't going to be necessary if it's not broke. And that's the list, I think, that Val was trying to say. If we identify what the problem is, and then we know we need a solution, we can ask him the right questions. And the same with, if the transportation is a problem and it's not working, we know, well, what is the fix? Because I wouldn't know how to fix it unless somebody told me. So we wouldn't know how to change something in APFO if we didn't know what we were trying to fix.
Okay, and I'm not sure who suggested Al Scavo or Jim Schulte.
I suggested Al Scavo just because he was one of the architects of it to begin with, and he was really good about balancing things, because and the whole thing was, you remember, I think Joe talked about how if you don't accept it the way it is, don't do anything, because, you know, it's gonna be out of balance. Don't play politics with it, and I think you have to be more careful not to play
So
politics.
more an approach?
Just
what the
a
approach
general
was?
kind of how do they balance it, so.
Didn't we have that
So
last
we're-
night?
We had Joe Leonard
Joe,
talking
yeah.
about it, but I think Al Scavo really was more into it than Joe was.
I want to spend 2 hours on that.
I think he comes back from time to time.
I think he lives on the eastern
Eastern
shore.
Shore.
Oh, okay.
In the winter. But in the winter.
The budget, this has come up a couple of times in different comments. How is the county budget impacted by the number of units built versus planned?
That was my question, and the general plan as well. I mean, the general plan calls for a certain number of units to be built in the county. And that's prudent on the part of, you know, the county's progress in the future and economic development and so forth. So our job is not to stop development, which I think some folks in here have in their mind.
Diane, can you
It's-
reset this? It's not working.
Andy, can you, or, hold on, can you hear me? She's calling in.
I'm here for the, speak. What's not working?
Who on the phone can hear me?
Nobody answered, I guess everyone can hear you.
answered, everybody.
Have them raise their hand.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have Reg, do we have Mary Ann?
Diane was on there.
How about
I'm
Diane?
here.
Oh, Mary Ann's there, okay. And Diane.
Diane.
She was going in and out when she was talking before.
Yeah,
too.
she may need to just call back in.
Diane, if you want to just hang up and use the same information to call back in, maybe that'll help, maybe that'll reset the connection.
She may not be able to hear us though. Can somebody, email, text, or the number?
Text messenger.
It could be on a cell phone, that may be the issue.
Yeah.
Diane, the connection seems to be lost.
Okay, so we still have Reg and Mary Ann, right? Sorry about that. Technology is always what you think it's gonna be. Okay, so the budget, is this, do we just have some questions on it, or do we need a speaker?
I think a speaker would be valuable, but, you know, they might come back with answers that some people don't want to hear. You know, if we did a sensitivity study where we figured if the target is 1,500 units, and we did 1,400, 1,300, or 1,000, or 800, what an impact that would have on the county. And I think that's an important concept for everybody to understand, because we do need growth, even though we don't need it in anybody's backyard that is in this committee. We do need it. I mean, any company that's thinking about moving to Howard County, they look for a couple of things. They look for a predictable review process. They look for homes that are suitable for their executives, and that's very important. Then they look for homes that are suitable for their mid-management, and then they look for homes for their rank and file. If we can't show them that we have reasonable stock in those areas, they're not gonna come here. I mean, I've been in those shoes. I've tried to get Coca-Cola and Kodak to move to an area. They look for those things very seriously. And, you know, if we've cut off the West, I mean, all the executive housing is gone. So now we've got to deal with what we have in the center of the county and in the east. And, you know, we've got to look at the standpoint of whether we're going to be able to get economic development. Because you're not going to have people like Merkel bring in, you know, 1,500 jobs if you don't have any housing for them.
I would like to add to the budget component.
Have we done those kind of sensitivity studies?
No. Or if anyone has.
Well, I mean, it kind of sounds like a fiscal analysis, but it also, which I alluded to, but didn't go into detail with, but it also sounds like more, somebody from the Economic Development Office, like.
Well, they're going to certainly put points on the curve,
The
but
nuts and bolts of the importance of economic development for you know, so.
That might be the preamble, but the bottom line is somebody needs to analyze what would happen if we went from 1,500 units down to 500, and what that would do to the county.
Well, Jeff, you did something.
Well, yeah, so what the fiscal analysis I indicated in my presentation, we did look at that, and we look at that for every general plan. And what it shows is that new growth pays for itself. In other words, the new homes and the new employees that we expect to come that are shown in the general plan, they generate enough income through property tax and income tax and other types of fees and taxes to pay for the services that they require, schools, roads, and all of that kind of thing. But new growth does not subsidize the county in the sense that if you were to drop the level from 1,500 to 750, it's not like, you know, so new growth pays for itself. We just wanted to make sure in the general plan that it does our plan, it does our proportion of future homes to retail and homes to office, et cetera. Does that mix work? We don't want to create a plan that is a fiscal drain on the county. So that's why we do those tests. But it's really kind of new growth is self-sufficient. So if you reduce new growth, that reduction is self-sufficient. But it's not like it would have an impact on the rest of the county. There's enough needs in the rest of the county. That's a completely different, you know, so.
So the contribution that new development is making to the various things like schools and roads and so forth, the county wouldn't have that need if it weren't for the new development, even though a lot of people think the intersections are too crowded, the schools need additional space, and all of the additional space is not a product of the new development. A lot of it is backfill, where people move in with kids, where people who moved out didn't have kids. So if that happened, if all of a sudden we didn't build any more new houses and we weren't bringing in the money that was associated with that to help pay for schools, then you're saying that the taxes in Howard County would cover any additional cost to the schools.
Well, so in 1990, or actually 2000 general plan, we did a fiscal study that looked at that question. Basically, what if you take a look, if you include the existing base plus the new growth, what would happen? And part of the equation of including the existing base is to include the costs of all the infrastructure needs for rehabilitation of schools and roads. And it showed that if you include the existing base, then the county is not in good shape. And Howard County is not unique. It's really county governments and governments in general, because county governments don't depreciate assets. So we build a road, but we don't fund for the eventual cost to replace that road. So that's really kind of a different budgetary question, I think. How are we going to meet these infrastructure needs that need further replacement? It's not really related to new growth. It's kind of, you know what I mean? So, but anyways, there was a.
That's a part answer, yeah.
Well, I mean,
I think that particular budget question, I don't know exactly how relevant it is, Jeff, though, because what we're supposed to be doing here is not trying to hasten or halt development. We're trying to figure out how to pace development, how to look at infrastructure and figure out how to pace it. So, you know, if we look at a budget study of if we halted development, what would happen? That's, to me, as irrelevant as saying if we if we did the opposite, what would happen? I mean, that's not our goal in either direction. That's just my thought.
well, it's relevant in one sense, I think, that there was discussion, I think, earlier about the concept of that, and I think the transition committee recommended, for example, the whole transfer tax. This came up before. And for example, in the previous APFO committee met, they looked at the budget and they came up with the concept of the excise tax for roads. That came out of the APFO committee. And that was that grand bargain that I think Joe Letter talked about initially, that the county agreed that we'll fund all the schools, we'll put controls on them, so we don't want to have too much growth and have overcrowding like we had in the 80s. We're going to put growth controls on the development community, but we'll fund it. But our fiscal study showed that we don't have enough money for new roads, for capacity expanding. So they came up with the concept of the excise tax, and that was passed, and that's been in effect since 1993.
And that's paid by the new units.
The new units.
Yeah, the new units pay for that.
I didn't even imply that no budget tax packs would be
Yeah.
applicable, but I think many would be.
Yeah.
For instance, how do we incentivize in the budget to fix issues that are holding up development? I mean, you know, if we recognize and agree that we need development.
I understand exactly what Lisa's saying,
You know what I
and
mean?
I can agree
If we
with that.
agree and say, hey,
Yeah.
yes, we need development, we're not trying to stop development, we're trying to figure out how do we work in the budget to get the infrastructure we need so that the development isn't burdensome.
Right, I agree with Lisa.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we have a baseline of, we're not going to stop development because we need it. I mean, we're basically addicted to it, so we just need, we need to. We are.
Yeah, no,
We need to do it in a way that it works for the community that's here and the people that are coming in. Because some of these people who are here now may want to go into 55 and older communities, and they're going to be paying all these additional costs that we're piling on. So, you know, let's try and be reasonable, understand where the baseline is. We're going to have growth. I mean, we really need it.
And Brett?
So getting back to the budget component, one of the key questions I've been asking all the people and some participants who aren't here presently, like Parks and Fire, is unit cost. We're looking at what does infrastructure cost per person, per unit? And we really need to know that for school growth, fire growth, police growth. Hospital, I know, is difficult. Unit cost varies with a particular type of structure, whether it's apartment or a $700,000 McMansion. But we need to know the actual costs that we are trying to recoup from growth, and that leads into phase two. How do we do it? Either via our current method of transfer taxes and excise taxes, or impact fees, and what is the legality of that? Because there are some restrictions in what you can get and what you're allowed to do as a county, and there are some things which haven't been explored yet. And we need to know what legally can be recommended and what also legally cannot be done that we would be out of scope as a county. And a budget director, finance director, and tax, as well as reports from all the various entities that are in our county budget is appropriate.
Oh, Karen, sorry.
I guess where my questions are, it's follow-up to a lot of this discussion and the learning that we've heard. If I heard correctly, the majority of the future development in the county is gonna be redevelopment, not necessarily new development. So I guess my thinking is, I'd wanna know where are the current failures, limitations, frustrations, whether it's budget, EDA, or whatever, so that we can sort of adjust our thinking when we look at the actual language from a growth-only new development to what is the impact going to be for redevelopment, and how do we need to think about the ordinance for a county that's going to be revitalizing and regrowing existing areas of the county. So that's what I'd like to hear.
How would we do that?
I don't know. I don't know if there are people now who are finding, you know, they've hit a wall in the current ordinance to understand it better, like, you know, where are things not happening? You know, when you were saying that, you know, we can't attract a new employer because we don't have the housing stock. That's things like that, like where are the challenges to the county addressing what we need in terms to stay vital and to make sure that we grow the tax base?
So Jeff, I mean, I would just react. This sounds almost like pre-planning for the next general plan, right? I mean, kind of the questions that Karen's asking are things that are questions that we would be policy questions that we would be asking ourselves in preparation for the next general plan. And when does pre-planning start in DPZ for the general plan process? I mean, how many years of in advance.
Well, it's probably about 2 years in advance. It's about a 2-year project typically.
But I
When you
think
start
part-
thinking about it.
But I think part of the current general plan emphasizes particularly town center, and that a lot of that could be considered redevelopment, and so maybe whether it's a speaker or a topic, and Val, I don't know, maybe this applies to some of your experience, or maybe you know somebody, but if Montgomery County or some other jurisdiction has kind of just 10 years ahead of where we are,
Right, they've
it already
lived it already.
redeveloped Silver Spring or Bethesda or someplace else, outside Maryland, but maybe that's, having somebody that talked to us that's been through that already might be helpful.
And along those lines, some of the things that Mark was saying earlier was like the downtown APFO is stronger because it's doing things differently. So, there was a reason why there was a change. And I'm sure it was based on failures, limitations, frustrations in existing. So that's kind of more of what I want to hear, is to guide the thinking.
But it also is a different kind of development. We never contemplated 5,000 units.
Density, good.
We just didn't contemplate.
Right, but if,
So it's
but
not
if,
in-
but
it's
but
not
if
in
we're
any
gonna,
other
but if we're
planning
gonna
area.
take another area, if we're gonna take another area now that maybe is single family and it's gonna become multi-use, multi-story, the
But it's not
density
there,
is.
it's not there yet, so we can't, how can we get it in
I'm
APFO?
talking about all around the county, that,
If it's not there, how can we
redevelopment.
write it in APFO? It's not plans, it's not.
I think we ought to avoid trying to be planned.
I think we need to-
I agree.
But I think we need to be forward thinking
Forward
in,
think, but
Forward think, I agree,
I
but
think the planning
what
part
this
is
is
done
gonna
for us.
support.
The general plan says this is what we want, where we want it, how we want it. It relies on this APFO mechanism. Everybody around the room can tell you 2 things that are wrong with it, at least, right? So that's what Patty was talking about. Let's cut away the chaff and get to the wheat. Let's figure out what it is we've got to fix.
Well, and that's on the budget topic. The big thing that I think on a very layman's term is if we know we're trying to control the growth so that you can keep up with facilities, can't you look at the facilities that are not keeping up with the growth? Do it the reverse way. Instead of saying we're gonna stop growth, we have to get the facilities to catch up to the growth, and the whole plan is already ahead of us. I feel the same way. I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, I didn't think the plan was on the table, and I don't think the amount of new starts are on the table. I think it's the facilities that we're trying to fix to match the growth. So we're doing it from the opposite way, and that's why I'm having such a hard time, because we have so much out there that we're not concentrating on what's broke, and then trying to figure out where it started to break. Because it's gonna be budget. I think he's absolutely right, it's gonna be budget, because the schools can't build fast enough because they don't have enough money. But then I hear that new growth pays for itself, and I'm like, okay, that's contradictory, because if the new growth pays for itself, then why aren't we?
But the old growth doesn't.
The issue
The old
is,
growth
the old
doesn't.
growth goes on exactly, the issue is.
And that goes back to what she.
The old growth.
The old
And
growth.
that's why.
So you're wanting new growth to pay for all the old growth.
Well, and
That's
that's
why we have to
why,
be careful.
and that's why it goes, it needs to be in front of you, but that's what she's saying. It's redevelopment, that you're trying to get a handle on, okay, well, how does redevelopment jump into the budget? And then you say, well, we don't know, because we can't predict, because the biggest thing is, and right now, we see it in Southern County, is that they tear down to build, and they're building bigger, because they don't have to fall in line with entries already approved. They don't have to change you're going from no driveway to two-car garages and extra parking. So instead of 1 car on the street, now we have 4 cars on the road, because they can build a bigger house and have more people there with more cars. So we are impacting it by our redevelopment. But I think, again, the committee, I am so overwhelmed, and I'm a layman here, but I can see what's broke, but I don't think we're getting to what's broke in time. We'll be here all day if we start addressing
Why don't we
everything.
switch to the other sheet, which is potential changes for APFO, and these came from only just a handful of people, but do what you're saying, Patty. Instead of saying, who do we want to come educate us more, say, okay, these are the things we think are broken, and then from
who's the
there, we
intelligent
go to the
person?
speaker.
We can jump to speakers.
But I want to recommend we take like maybe a 5-minute break. So if you guys will look that over, it should simulate some thinking on your part, you're like, oh yeah, well, that part, I don't think it's working.
And
then we can
then we'll jump
tie it
back to
back, yeah.
speakers.
Yeah, so if you guys wanna take 5 minutes and grab a glass, a bottle of water and reread some of those, the suggestions people have made, whether you agree with them or not, or it may come up, you may come up with another idea. I'm gonna grab a bottle of water.
No, it wouldn't be.
But get into that mode. What's not working? Or whatever it is, get as specific as we can about what is not working, and maybe what do we need to know to be able to revise that, if that's what we would be doing. Rather than-
Can I suggest that we just do it like, list a topic, put,
Right.
go to a next topic,
Not-
because
not
we
in-
discuss every 1 through 20 minutes.
Exactly, not come up with the solutions now. So, I'm gonna step out of the way, slide over here. So,
We're going to talk about what's working for.
oh, what
Do that.
do we want to talk about what's working first, or do we, Patty's saying just get rid of that stuff?
That's her suggestion, that you say it's working.
Well, if we all agree that it's working, it takes it off, right?
Okay,
So what is working is as relevant as. Because whatever's left after we figure out it's working. By default. Resell houses that, what you like. Watch it. I don't have to.
okay, what's working?
Yeah, I'm ready when you guys are.
I have a suggestion.
Stu?
Suggestion?
Yeah, if y'all turn me down, I'm not hurt my feelings. If you look at the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance inventory, okay, you go to page 1, and it lists the 14 counties, and then we have Howard, of course. Howard only has 4 of the categories. You look at the other big counties, Montgomery County, they have 7. You look at PG, they have, it looks like, 7. So my question would be to put down the categories in APFO that are not covered in Howard County, such as, that are in Montgomery County and PG, and Arundel, for example. And you have fire, police are not categories in Howard County. My question would be, why? Why not?
Because we're better than those counties.
Because they're not working, not
Because it is
broken.
working.
They're not broken.
Yeah, they're working.
You think so, huh?
Yeah.
Well, and then also, kind of like a comment on that, the other, keep in mind that the other counties don't have allocations. So Howard County is very unique in the fact that we have allocations, and the intent of the allocations part is to kind of be a growth control in general for all capital facilities. And then the schools test is on top of that. So the fire, for example, so the fire department, they can plan for future growth based on the general control caps. I'm just saying, I'll say, pointing out, that they don't have,
Fire is not working.
they don't have.
Well, just one on the board, okay? Fire, police, and then you got, like I said, healthcare.
Let's not debate.
And then you've got,
I don't want to throw it on the board. Why do we create issues that aren't there?
That aren't there.
you don't know if they're not there.
It's like saying we don't have enough grocery stores.
You don't know if they're not there.
Then they're not there.
Cool.
Do we
What-
have
what- what-
issues
what
with
is-
coverage for fire?
Absolutely, you might have.
Do we have?
With the continuance of,
Police.
with the continuance of building, you might have.
Well, could I suggest that, I mean, Stu's brought that up. None of us really know except sort of, you know, subconsciously, whatever, that a homework assignment for Carl or somebody is to go and ask the fire chief, the police chief, is there an issue? And come back next time and say there is, there isn't. And if there is, then we have to talk about it, and if not, we dismiss it.
Fire in general
Okay.
is funded separately, and that funding may potentially be taking funding out that could solve other problems. So you have to look at it holistically, is what.
Yeah, but rather than talking about it more now, Stu suggested it, and we're gonna, part of this list is that we're gonna, you know, Carl and county staff is gonna take this list and come back with some more information about it if we decide we wanna look into those topics.
Thank you.
Sharon?
I would like to add connectivity, and that is transportation, it is transit, it is bicycles, it is sidewalks, it is crosswalks, and that's countywide. And we all know about, well, there's this much sidewalk here, and then there's none for 100 yards, and then there's another piece. But it's more than that. It's like go from this side of the street to that side of the street, and when you get to the intersection, there is no crosswalk.
Yeah, Blue Stream and Howard Square.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Stu, really quickly, are those the only three subcategories that you wanted to make note of? Or were there,
Stormwater, maybe stormwater drainage,
Stormwater, okay.
maybe. The environment is another one.
I heard someone say park, someone say park.
Parks and recreation, address funding category.
I'm sorry?
They're saying stormwater.
Stormwater, okay.
Stormwater and parks.
Yeah.
Are those in other jurisdictions?
You just put them on
No.
the board.
They're not on the chart.
Stormwater is.
Stormwater.
So we got connectivity, but
I had a category, it's sort of encompassed a little bit in maybe 7 and 8 on this list were my suggestions, but when I think the last time we did APFO, we didn't have, the town center plan hadn't been done, so the density of development that's planned there, I don't think was contemplated when we last revised APFO. Some changes were made in that plan, but is there anything else we need to think about? And the 2 examples I gave were if we're building apartment complexes that have 380 units and the allocation for town center is 300, that may need a revision. Or if the roads test is only one level of service different, but there just are physical constraints in town centers, so you could never make an improvement as you increase that density, that might need to be changed. So it's kind of a category, it's not a specific
Like
recommendation, but
high-density
a category to, with the increased density we're planning in town center, are there any changes to APFO? And those are 2 areas where I
You're
could.
talking about general APFO, not downtown.
Maybe both.
Are you saying take lessons from downtown and put it?
Maybe, but I'm saying in town center in particular, I think there's constraints about the roads. The issue of the size of apartment complexes as we're doing more denser multifamily development, because Route 1 has some of that too. Is there a conflict between the allocations and the size of the apartment complexes that might be built that need to be, can you borrow from the future? I don't know exactly, I can't remember exactly how all that works, but then maybe some adjustments needed.
That's a topic that I thought of, that I don't see that's addressed, is the overall planning of larger development. That if you have something that's as big as Maple Lawn, and there's more thought process put into it, that if more people contributed up front instead of in phases, couldn't we do things better with an incentive, so to speak, that more people chip in the beginning to plan everything and to fund everything, and that they be in on some incentive, that by getting in early development stages, that would be a
Well,
question to
could I go on
developers.
to that, because, when we were just talking about connectivity, I mentioned Blue Stream and Howard Square, which both have a single point of egress to Route 1. And there's other potential capital facilities that could have been associated if those developments work together.
Exactly.
And I don't have it any more formulated than that in my head. I mean, Diane, I've been talking about that for years. You were on the board.
Well, that's what we're seeing in Southern County. We see a development go in and put a little sidewalk, and then nobody else had a sidewalk. And then another development goes in and has a sidewalk.
Right, Ashbury, they just had these beautiful sidewalks.
Yeah,
and then they
there's
had-
nowhere.
Yeah, they go 100 yards and they stop.
Or we have intersections with very nice crosswalks and no sidewalks to them.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and what would be great is if we know there's gonna be development, and we know that the builders wanna build, but they can't get in because the school is closed, but we know they're gonna build. So if we have a closed school, and we know the builders wanna build, couldn't we get them in and give them some type of incentive that if somebody were to fund everything up front, that school construction and road construction and sidewalk construction up front, that they have some type of incentive that would move the process further?
She's not talking about a requirement, she's talking
No,
about.
but I mean, you're talking about,
Organization.
it's an option, you start, asking a developer to fund
Yeah,
that
it's
without
an option.
4 years, without.
Wait
without
less
like
time
school.
if you do
These
this.
guys are,
I think we should
yeah.
be open to that.
Oh, yeah,
discussion.
no, I'm just, I can't see, asking a developer that's closed for 4 years to front the money for something.
But that's the.
But I mean, that's what I'm thinking, I was going back to, that's what you're talking
Right,
about.
the notion has been, let's not do impact fees because it's too expensive, it's not fair, or whatever.
Right.
But I think that we all should be open to discussing having impact fees as an incentive, as an option for developers to be able to maybe do things faster, because they're gonna directly fund an improvement.
Puts it out there, and we get it out there.
Because there's too much disconnect. When you go along Route 1 in particular, every little subdivision is their own entity now. And even on the residential side of it, when we're reselling them, every one of them is a separate condo management.
Oh, yeah.
And the condo management along Route 1 is a nightmare, because some subdivisions are already wiped out, that they have too many delinquencies, and others are liquid, and yet the whole stream of development gets, we can't buy over there because they're all defunct, because they can't get funding. So it hurts the sales over there, and it's causing a lot of problems. And some of the subdivisions over in Emerson are so small that for the percentage to be approved for financing, it only took one or two that didn't pay their dues, and you have a whole subdivision that's impacted. Mark?
Well, I wanted to make a comment about that, because I understand the idea, and
You get a comment,
Okay.
one comment.
Sure.
okay.
We want to make a long list.
But I just wanted to say that there is an example of that already, and that's the SEPAs that Howard Hughes has in place for their development. And I guess the reason why it's worthwhile is because of the scale of what's going on, and to ask smaller developers to do that might be somewhat cost prohibitive. If they have to proffer, it's almost like, some people could say, well, that's extortion. So, I think if you walk,
Only the big guys can do it.
and then only the big guys can do it.
A group of mid-size.
So,
Keep coming up with rules that really make it.
right.
The
But
public
that's the
companies
problem,
don't
that is
do
the
that.
problem, is that only the big guys can do it. There's no way that we can get the organization. To me, APFO should have been organization, and I see it created disorganization, because you have little pockets, little people, and you have a development here, somebody gets a couple permits here, but then they can't finish, so they gotta wait till they get more allotments. So it's dragging out construction, and then we start constructing over constructing. Like you improve a road, and then somebody else gets another subdivision approved, and we start doing road construction again. We're always under construction because somebody along the major routes is doing a new intersection, or a new sidewalk, or a new crosswalk.
I agree with predictability. This whole thing is supposed to be predictable. It says it throughout this, and it's not predictable anymore. What can we do to make it predictable?
That's exactly,
So-
thank you, that's
So
exactly.
we don't go out there and do
Yes.
something,
Yes.
we know what the rules are,
That's it.
we'll live with them.
Yes.
Yeah,
If you
you
say
can-
you're never gonna develop this piece of property,
Right.
fine, we're not gonna develop it. But if we go with the rules, we do what we think we're supposed to do, and you change the rules on us, that's not fair.
Because they can buy out, they can,
Right.
instead of improve the road, give the money away. And I think somebody asked, okay, what are you doing with the money? Are you keeping up with what the, in lieu of? Because we don't know, because there's so many exceptions to the rule that all the plans that we made was to make sure that everybody followed the rule. But then there's exceptions to it.
But there's so much fee in lieu of that has gone on for decades and decades and decades. And that's part, it's not the only reason, but that's part of why things are not connected. Somebody paid a fee in lieu of,
Well,
not
the
knocking
idea
the
is-
developers, but
We're
they
not a
were
big
allowed to
fan
pay
Yeah.
a fee in lieu of.
We're
And
not a
that
big
has to
fan of
stop.
No, it doesn't.
She's
The
saying
fee
we are.
needs to be used for what it's intended for.
What they collected it for.
Yeah, but they don't use
They
it.
don't-
Okay.
That's not,
So
That's a
they-
different story.
Yeah, it's not the builder's fault.
So we have a few of them on the list.
Other categories. Fred?
All right, I'll give you this grocery list rather than go through the debate on each one. Starting with the least controversial, or maybe, depending who the solid waste as a category under the categories we were listing.
Great, you can put it over
Especially regarding
in this category, solid waste.
Alpha Ridge and how we're gonna handle solid waste in the future. Next one is cross-community agreements. All of you know what's going on at Laurel Park. There's potential for APFO agreements to bridge multiple communities. We have neighbors.
Multiple counties, you mean?
Yep.
Sorry.
This is counties.
Thank you.
Agreements, you said?
Yes, cross county.
allocation rollovers, how they're addressed. As we fill up the areas, we're having a little level of unpredictability because of the rollover component. And lastly, absolute number one is percent capacity of schools.
So debating what the percentage should be,
Yeah.
altering the percentage. Okay.
Capacity, what percentage you using?
I want to throw something out there. Because I think that that's gonna be such
Oh,
a
you're
huge
right.
thing.
When you're making the
look
bed,
at
you
the
can only
current-
pull on one side of the sheet.
When you look at the current thing, it's 115%, 4 years, right? You look at those two numbers. I want us all to think about whether that needs to just be those two numbers, and either they're changed or they're not, and they're just those two numbers. Why can't we consider a scale that would maybe enable us to compromise better than just arguing over whether 115 should be 110 or 120, and whether 4 years should be 3 years or 5 years? I think, why not have a scale? For instance, if a school is 150% or more, maybe it should be more than 4 years. Or if it's 115, maybe you can be less than 4. I mean, if we can compromise that way, because let's face it, a school, the more of a crowd a school is, the longer it's gonna take to fix it. So I just want people to think about what they think would be fair to have variations of the percentage and the years together.
Because part of that too is if there was already a new school slated for that particular area is of expected development, then that's actually an easy fix.
Yes.
It's the ones where there's not gonna be a new school, and
Exactly.
in addition could be problematic.
Maybe we should talk about when it takes 5 years to get allocations, and then you start to take the school test, and it takes another 4 years to get through that. That doesn't seem fair or predictable either. I mean, maybe we can work that as well.
Yeah,
Well, I think
What
it should be a
should
topic,
say-
is allocations and
So,
children.
so you're saying combine allocations
So
and
the
schools
time-
test
I
in
mean,
some way?
4 years for everything, 5 years.
So
for
that's-
everything.
so the time they work
together.
So
Yeah.
combine
It's
allocations in
crazy
schools.
to pass one and then go to the next.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
they
a
should be
1-2
looked
punch.
at the same
Or-
time.
Yeah,
or
the timing,
And slash timing. So
Whole time, yeah.
And related to that, I put this in number 8, is the 115% or 120% or whatever it is based on the capacity, and when correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think when the school system changes their programming, like goes from 25 kids to a class to 22 in a class, or half-day kindergarten, full-day kindergarten, the capacity of that school just shrunk. So now it's 115% of a smaller number than it was before, and it has nothing to do with growth or anything else. It just, the school system had great intentions because they think it's going to make education better, but it has an impact on development. So is there some way to, and I don't know what it is, but
What impact does that have?
With the full day K, it didn't, because we built additional
Yeah, we
classrooms.
built-
And that was a state requirement, by the way, it wasn't a Howard
Some of
County
these, we gotta
decision.
be cautious, some of these are state.
We
Yeah,
phased
oh, yeah,
it.
yeah, but
But that had no impact
But my
on
point is,
capacity.
wherever it's coming from, it impacts the
But
capacity of the
I
school.
think the question is, if
Yeah.
something had already been approved.
Right, right.
Should it be, you know, should we revisit, should it be turned off if it was already approved and then something else changed? Like, how do you handle?
Yeah, I'm just throwing that out.
Right, no,
This is
it's-
another
versus
aspect of the whole
something
school
like
test that we need
kind of
to look
sure.
at.
But again, go back to my joke, I mean, you can only pull on one side of the
Yeah,
at
oh,
a
yeah,
time.
yeah,
So if
yeah.
you're gonna change capacity, then there's no point in changing percent utilization. You have to decide which one.
Yeah, I'm just throwing that as another part of the discussion, another part of the discussion, right, yeah, you can't do it all.
Yeah.
Somewhere I just would encourage us, this is just me, I use the word simplicity. I mean, so many codes, so many things that we do today are so complex and they interact and I just think that as a topic, somewhere in this, we have to make sure that it's easily measured. It's what really you're saying, Joel. If we change this to this convoluted capacity, we have enough trouble trying to figure out what capacity.
And another thing I think that,
And same thing with 115 or whatever the number is. I think we gotta-
if you start having, like, there's an APFO capacity for a school, and then there's the school system's capacity for operating a school, and then there's the state capacity, which is designed to prevent them from having to fund us.
Gotcha again.
You end up with confusion, you know, so, you know, my guess is percent utilization is easier for
So
everyone.
simplified.
But that means accepting that we might change capacity if we change the program,
or you make,
Trust me.
or the percentage is higher because you know the program is likely to change to reduce the capacity or something.
But that doesn't
Yeah.
happen that often. I mean, the class size changes happened 15 years ago.
Yeah,
It hasn't, it's not like it happens on a regular
Well, what he's
basis.
referencing is that we made some changes more recently when we reevaluated the floor plans.
Oh, the capacity.
Yeah, the
I know what I was really thinking is, the
Oh, yeah.
last time we did APFO, right after we did.
Oh,
sure,
that
after
you
we
are
did-
going back.
That
Okay, my bad.
The classroom size went from 25 to 22 on average, I mean, it varied
Yes.
by grade, and it was like, wow, that 10% of the capacity just disappeared.
Yes.
Well, in 2 grades, it was just first and second.
Yeah, but I mean, but it.
But yeah,
still,
we need
right,
more classrooms.
Right, so we had just reduced the test from 120, 115, and then 2 years after that, the school system removed some of the capacity, so it had like a double whammy
Yeah.
on, you know, so that's
It
my
did.
point.
Talking about
doesn't
all-day
happen
pre-K.
often.
I mean, all-day pre-K, what's that gonna
Is there
do?
gonna
School
be-
capacity,
Second
when you
student's
start going back,
capacity.
that's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah,
And that-
unless you're
that-
gonna add
I don't
classrooms.
think this governor will do it, but the next governor might. I mean, that is a big topic.
It's a big deal. And a lot of-
Yeah, but it's a
I thought you said you were done with your list.
That was the important list.
Go ahead, Brent.
Have obviously there's a review that has to go to the state on APFO, but a regular APFO review for effectiveness of meeting its goals and a threshold to reconvene if it does not meet the goals.
How about some of the people we haven't heard from? Anybody else got some thought running around the back of your mind? Paul?
I'd like to have the group consider weighting allocations. Give a different weight to an apartment versus a townhouse versus a single-family detached home. They operate differently, they have different effects on the community. But right now, a one-bedroom apartment has the same APFO importance as a 5-bedroom home in the West. There's
Not
a,
any new ones in it.
there is a scale in the neighborhood preservation sending legislation, I guess it is, that might be suitable, a 3-2-1 scale. So an apartment would be a third, a townhouse would be a half of a single-family detached. I don't know what that does to the numbers, but it might be a way of matching the gauge of an impact to what's being proposed.
Probably look at too, I'm trying to think back to that very first or second meeting, on it. What we had talked about, transfer fees and the different impact fees that go along with that. And I'm not sure if that went in by review fee and lieu structure, but I think looking at the different fees, what they are, and maybe even looking at, so since we were talking about weighting structure, about differentiating that based on like maybe where that we do need more transfer versus new development. I'm thinking about this, looking at the schools chart with that, like looking at some of the impact areas and making the transfer fee a little bit less or more depending on where it is, like kind of thing. I don't know how to-
It's sort of.
Geographical location compared to the open closed chart type of thing. I don't know, it's kind of a more of a, but a differentiated type of thing for that.
Is that on the table? Like, in other words, are we allowed to even discuss,
To recommend?
to make a recommendation on
Well, the first
restructuring?
meeting, he said that they made a recommendation, had to get approved by the state, but he said that they had done that in the last APFO.
Well, right, like the excise tax.
Right.
So it would just be looking at potential fees to better charge to developers and how we charge them.
Well, I think, or maybe what you're saying, there was a proposal several years ago to increase the transfer tax and have that pay for schools as a means of having the backfilling of existing homes with more kids, help pay for schools, so it's not all just on new development. It didn't go through, but that was, that part, I think is a little bit of what
I
you're
was trying to
saying.
find my notes on that, but I
And
thought
I
it was
think-
way back at the beginning.
And I think Joe Rudder or somebody suggested,
Yes.
even if you took the existing transfer tax and just allocated it, either a percent of it or a 0.5% of it or something, that could address it too.
And this might go back to the person of having Al Scavo come in or somebody like that who worked on one of those that might be able to, we ask questions related to like going back to that community discussion.
Shirley?
It's really a one thing, but it's really two things. It's livable communities, because that takes into health and a whole lot of other things, as well as relating back to connectivity, complete streets. Because those two things interplay into a lot of these other things.
Okay. The, one thing that we had mentioned was changing the terminology, so that we're not saying open and closed.
That's a
That
good
is
idea.
such a negative connotation. So better terminology maybe is the category.
On
On
that
the
same,
schools.
Right.
You don't wanna call them delayed schools.
on that
Better
same
words,
path,
I don't know what they are right now.
before you're gonna go to the road
Okay,
test.
and Abby, you have another.
Under connectivity, I think when under connectivity or added to, we kind of added transit and crosswalks. We didn't talk about sidewalks, is that?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
A little
Is
bit,
it up there?
yeah, she
I don't
mentioned
see
it.
that.
That's part of it.
I see crosswalks. I wanted to.
Sidewalks, yeah.
Make sure sidewalks were on
Question
there
of
too.
Sharon Lee, to your point, so if right now, you know, the outcome, APFO's outcomes is growth management, by bringing in livability, connectivity, that's kind of adding outcome measurements to APFO, so are
Yeah,
you?
but it has to be something measurable and in the APFO,
So that's
or
what I
they
mean.
won't do
So
it.
do we wanna add new measurements or indicators to APFO beyond just growth management? Do you want it to be quality, do you want there to be quality of life
Yes.
measurements
Yes.
put in APFO? So maybe for like livable communities, say, the keep livable communities, but we can just say, you know, new outcomes to APFO law.
You could draw a little connector, except
Yeah,
but
I'd
over
like
the
that.
incentives for developers to front infrastructure. Those are kind of, you can
Which
see
one?
those, as incentives for developers to front infrastructure seems to be kind of connected to the outcomes. So
So-
that, you know,
So you can link this and this.
I would-
You're gonna see that. There you go, there you go.
I mean, I just see that, because, you know, that's how you would, if you meet these targets with some
Yeah.
kind of,
Right, then you could,
incentive system, then.
maybe you get
You go
a certain
forward.
exemption, or you get a pass,
Mhm.
an automatic pass.
Somebody on the phone had something, I think. Was it Diane
Yeah,
or me?
if we're doing the add-ons and things, if we're doing the add-ons and things we think that we need to be thinking about, we do need to be thinking about the ER, the emergency services that we have, the electricity that we're struggling with in the
So
older neighborhoods,
EMS,
the
say
services
EMS.
for the aging, because the population is aging. And these are things, I don't know where we're putting them, but we were gonna at least discuss them to see whether we were gonna put them into the conversation or not.
Like that.
And again, the environmental and stormwater management, because these are new ways that people are doing things in other cities that we're not doing here.
Mhm.
So there's a couple things I'd like to see on the list to discuss whether we're gonna discuss them or not. Because there's problems that I see in the county that we need to fix one way or another. I don't know where we're gonna put them, but. So ER, electricity, sort of staging, environmental, stormwater.
Hospitals are different than EMS, even though they're.
Do like, energy, energy, put energy.
With Laurel closing, that presents
In addition to the open closed charts, I think we should review whether projects should proceed or the procedure regarding future redistricting or future capital funded projects, and whether we should look closer toward allowing the allowances once they've actually been delivered as opposed to proposed.
He's talking about OCIP.
The capital improvement.
The chart, will show, because there's a CIP, what he wants to, am I right, Brent?
You can proceed based on some future granted promise, but not delivered promise.
This is sort of the school version of the road issue of whether it's funded or delivered or under
You are
construction.
correct, phasing and delivery.
Kind of along that
Shovel the
line.
ground versus funding.
Along that line, if you've got an open school next to a closed school, if there's capacity there, why can't you go ahead and move forward anyway, if you call it adjacent to?
Well, because we talk about potential
Yeah,
redistricting,
I was
yes.
gonna have you on my committee.
We just volunteered for redistricting.
His kids are out of school now.
I'm not saying redistricting, but there's some schools that have chosen not to redistrict on. If there's an open school adjacent to that, why couldn't development go ahead anyway? I mean, it's not our fault.
Anyone have anything on roads? We haven't really touched on.
Talked about that for 45 minutes earlier.
Right.
Well, we wrote down those 2 points, right?
Yeah, I
Oh,
had,
Yeah, maybe that's something.
projects that involve state roads, should they be held till their state funding?
And I would add the question I asked before for the separation grade, redefining specifically what's required of developers based on particular impact. I'm not asking if they have anything they aren't delivering, but looking at the ratios.
Is everybody satisfied with the test that's done now and the level of service and all that, or is that
Do
something?
you see a problem?
I'd like to see us consider what's in downtown Nashville, especially for roads, for the general. I mean, I'd love to see sort of a chart.
Apply downtown.
Oh,
you know, sort of
She wants to see a comparison.
Oh.
What is downtown versus what is downtown?
Yeah.
That's what we-
Okay.
Yeah, versus county law.
Well, it's more of a target approach, you know, once this is done, she gets us forward. Gets back to like, outcomes kind of idea.
Yeah, just kind of thinking about, you know, what's in the downtown outflow that would make sense to the general.
Okay,
Should we go back to, are there other change ideas before we go back to speakers? Any other change ideas right now? You, Paul?
Two minor ones. I'd like to propose that we exempt minor subdivisions and 4-lot re-subdivisions from APFO. They represent less than 2% of the volume, but they're mostly mom and pops.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's minor subdivision 4-lot, four
Minor subs, 4 others, or a 4-lot re-sub.
How about a complete review of all exemptions?
That's a good one.
So complete review of exemptions.
The other one I'd like to propose is that MIHUs not be required to get an allocation.
Say that again?
No allocation for MIHUs.
There isn't anymore, or
Yes,
is
there are.
there, it's gone.
Well, we don't have a MIHU pot pool, is that what you mean?
An MIHU is required now to get an allocation.
Well, that's related to zoning. MIHU is required for zoning,
Oh, no, I'm saying an allocation.
an allocation.
So I have 10 units in the job, I have to get one allocation for my one MIHU.
Oh, so you want affordable units to be exempt?
From, just from the allocation,
Just
not from roads, not from schools.
Okay,
just
so, right,
allocation.
exemption of affordable units.
from allocation.
Did you talk to Tom Carvel?
Yes,
He did.
I pitched that idea at lunch.
He did. Okay, good.
Well, there is actually an exemption
And
if
the
the county
switching of
council
If the
approves.
council, right.
multifamily. The switching of single family to multifamily doesn't have allocations in that direct school test. So that's kind of the infill, or the infill, the new thing they're doing besides building backyards is trying to make single families to double families. So I don't know where to put that, but it has to come up because that totally trashes the school test.
Talking multifamily?
Switching from single family to multifamily.
Well, she's talking about multifamily moving into a single.
Into single homes.
Multifamily.
I don't think we can
I don't think we can do that.
That's called,
We'll type all this up for everyone.
Societal
We'll
change.
type all this up.
yeah.
Actually, it's fair housing. It's fair housing violation,
Yeah.
so you prohibit. So no,
So, I mean, right now, we have, when this was created, they didn't have such a thing as an environmental concept plan. But right now, that's the first thing we have to do in every project.
Right.
That should be the first stage. That should be when we take our test, not when, not sketch
So
plan.
you want to
Just-
say change when the tests are applied, at what
Right.
point in the
ECP
development
is-
process?
ECP particularly, that's.
So
what
that
makes no sense.
kinda
That's
gets
the
into
equivalent of
the-
the sketch plan when this was
Right,
done.
so that kind of gets into subdivision regulation. Is,
Well,
Jeff,
this
is
talks
Outlaw
about-
mentioned?
This talks about sketch
Well,
plan.
yeah, that's a good point. The reason ECPs aren't tested because technically ECPs aren't in the subregs, they're in the design manual. So APFO refers to the initial test in the subregs, and since ECPs aren't in the subregs, we don't test the ECP, we test the sketch. So,
But doesn't every project have to do an
so
ECP?
now what's happening is, I think there was discussion about redoing the subregs and including the ECPs as part of the subregs, which would address that.
That would be our first step.
Yeah, that would be the concept of.
And we change that first.
Right,
Yeah.
So.
Subdivision regs,
Yeah.
so, yeah, so, for now, is this a good list? I don't wanna cut this
Well, and it's not like you're never gonna be able to bring up something else, until we're finished, so.
It's today's work.
Something to monitor.
So I guess
For someone.
what the plan, do you wanna start, do you wanna
Go ahead.
touch on what the?
Thinking?
So we've anticipated that this was gonna generate a lot of ideas. We anticipated this meeting was gonna generate a lot of ideas. And so we thought ahead about how we might wanna structure the debates going forward based on all of the ideas that are generated today. And we came up with an approach, and the hope, we wanna share that approach with you, get your reaction to it, tell us if you think that'll work, so that we can have pretty structured debates on these topics going forward. I mean, what we're gonna do, take these lists back, okay? Sit down, try to categorize them, come up with maybe 3 or 4 categories, and fit each of these ideas into a category, and then devote a meeting to a category, and then debate each of them. Today, we just kind of listed them, but in the next meeting, we'll actually debate the idea. We'll have you debate the ideas. And then the meeting subsequent to you debating those ideas from that category, we would then provide you with research on those ideas, answers to your questions, thoughts on who it might be beneficial for you to hear from, possible actions that the county can take, either legislatively or through zoning, what is kind of out of the county's purview, so that we can kind of enhance all of these discussion points with education, since we feel that education is a valuable part of looking at APFO, as it's kind of proven to be over the first few months. A thought we had was so that each of you could feel that you are heard equally, and so that our chair and co-chair can feel as they are a part of the conversation. I mean, maybe have like a third-party facilitator come in and drive those conversations about the categories of ideas. Someone with a planning background who has done these type of exercises before, so that way we have some kind of systematic approach to getting your ideas on paper, and that way when the meeting ends, we can then do the appropriate and effective level of work at the county to address those for the subsequent meetings. So comments on whether or not you like that structure of categorizing the ideas, comments of whether or not you like doing a meeting of discussing the ideas, then a second meeting where we come back and bring you information, comments on using a facilitator to carry out this approach.
I think it's a good idea. I just want to make sure that we still get those potential speakers and topics covered before we do that.
Right, so we didn't really finish the speakers
Yeah.
list, and maybe I know it's 9 o'clock already. I mean, if everybody wants to just dedicate another 10 or 15 minutes to the speakers list, we can tonight. But I want to make sure that that's an approach that everyone around the table would be interested in, and if not, by all means, we're open to other ones. Now, we would have to find that facilitator, we might have to pay a facilitator, so there might be some costs, and I don't know how people feel about there being costs attributed to that. Well, we don't have a budget, but we would have to retroactively look at.
I would think they would have to understand Howard County. In other words, somebody come in from California to come in.
No, I know, and we would try to find
They
someone.
have to know how things work here, because
So-
otherwise.
Go to Howard Community College. There's that.
Well, and there are some volunteer groups that do this type of work through the community college that we would research and try to find the best person for this, if you want to go down this route. And so now's the opportunity to tell us whether or not you want us to, because it's going to take at least 2 weeks to find someone, which is when our next meeting is.
Mark Thompson, who used to be at Columbia Association.
Well,
is there.
he's with the county now. We want to make sure
yes.
that the person is a neutral party, so.
Just neutral? He's a very good facilitator.
I don't think it's necessary to have a facilitator. I think this group is mature enough to be able to handle the situation. Yes, in fact, there may be some disputes, that's okay. But I think if we have major problems where we can't handle ourselves, then you go and try to get a facilitator.
Well, I think the challenge though is how do we direct the conversation? And this conversation's gone all over the place.
So, yeah, no, I gotta listen.
That's our challenge.
And for tonight, this was the purpose,
Bruce,
but we wanna make sure.
Bruce, in our DPZ transition team, we had, mixed feelings.
Yeah, but we had a smaller group. I mean, it's gonna be very challenging with the different opinions that we have here to really try to, I mean, I don't know how to really get, even if you categorize, the opinions are gonna come flying.
A facilitator is just a tool to use
Yeah.
to facilitate,
If we have to pay for it, I'm against it.
Yeah, I think the benefit of the facilitator is taking the discussion and molding it into something that is meaningful. I mean, we can all talk about what we agree with, what we don't agree with, what we think is better, but trying to get that, because our objective is to come up with a set of recommendations to the county executive, which then he can massage and do what he wants with and present to the county council, because it is an ordinance and it must be passed by the county council. So, I mean, there are still multiple steps after us, but we need to formulate and get concrete and clear.
About Kevin's,
Huh?
about Kevin's.
School system has facilitators, they do it, that's
Oh.
part of their job.
They don't have
Technically,
any.
they're government employees, we're all paid by
Yeah.
county government.
I mean, is the group comfortable with having a school system person be?
They don't have anything to do with what I.
They wouldn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
They probably never talked to Joel.
You're pretty harsh about it.
I actually was gonna say that,
It's out of the
I think,
professional.
I think that having a facilitator, I don't think it's essential that they know the content of what we're doing,
The
or
process.
even, but just facilitate the discussion to make sure that
You gotta cut
nobody's
people
too long-winded, or that we're getting all the ideas on the table, or that we're moving in a direction. And for that, I don't think you need the expertise of any of the background of this information. I think depending on the topic of the night, we want some of the experts here in case we need to field some questions. But I don't think they need to be facilitators or part of the facilitative process, except to be there for question and answer.
Pat?
Brett was,
Oh, I'm sorry, Brett, Patty.
In any type of discussion like this, you're gonna have pros and cons. Everything I propose in the federal government, it isn't win-win. It's usually compromises. And something where we could document our pros and cons for various stances and make it publicly available would allow all of us to get our thoughts out. And I think in some cases, you may find us supporting each other on particular things. You can weight the pros and cons, but getting that out there, I think, helps make an informed decision and why you make an informed decision.
Are you saying the facilitator may help facilitate that process?
Well, I'm very concerned. I've been in many facilitated discussions in this county where the facilitator steers the discussion. I'd like the ability for all of us to be able to have input into the process. And if it's a crazy notion, it's at the bottom of the list. Most people know what a crazy notion is in the pros and cons. But they're gonna spend their time and effort to put information that they feel is relevant and important to this. And I don't think you're gonna have any off-the-wall ideas because it's so important to all of us.
We're not hearing, Pat, okay.
well, and traveling on that thought, and then something else, two parts. So the first part is that most of the facilitators that we use in our strategic plan is to build consensus. What they do is they hear the comments and they try to make them all the same. Like, in other words, if you got people that all disagree on something, they get that side to say what they disagree on, and all the people who agree to say something else, so that at least you have two opinions going forward, so we can zoom in and try to make it easier to make decisions, because we're, like, when you look at that list, there's a lot of it that's very similar. And that's why I was gonna suggest that we not pick the speakers yet, because a lot of that can be combined into different categories, and then there'd be one expert for 3 different topics. And that would make it easier, because otherwise, looking at that, it looks like we need 15 speakers, but we probably only need 3. And we would probably have to put them in categories and then pull out what was the intention of those categories to make sure that the points that Brent was making was not lost by paraphrasing.
And I'm very concerned about the phrase consensus, as well-intentioned as it is. Me and Stu just came off a task force where approximately 2/3 were on one side, 1/3 were on the other. But just by the very nature of the votes, consensus was made up by the selection of the committee, by the pros and cons and being able to list those. At least if you're in a minority, you get your point out. And if it is very relevant and very powerful, even if consensus leans the other way, that may be enough that our legislators might go, we might want to consider that.
But I think that's what a moderator does, is they try to bring everybody into the middle a little bit better than, because they hear what you say and they're impartial and they try to bring everybody to the middle. That sometimes when you just say what you want to say and everybody does a dry vote, you will have yeses and nos. But trying to find that, when I heard of Cole talk about what they did before and that it had to be 100% consensus, there's no way with the size of this group and from the various opinions that are already spoken that we'll have that consensus. But we have to find an amenable way to get to the middle on the most important topics. We'll never agree on everything. I just think that that's a given when we started the first night. There's no way. We decided.
Yeah.
We won't have 100%, we're not going for 100%, but I think that the points have to be raised and documented, like you said, so that they are points that are not misrepresented, your thoughts, and that people understand what you're saying, and I think that somebody impartial can do that. Because otherwise, I think we're all putting in our 2 cents.
Do either you, Diane, or Cole both feel comfortable in orchestrating such a task, pardon the pun, of saying, being the facilitator, acting as a facilitator? Because I'll tell you right now, and I'll say it in public, as I've said it before, Mr. Schnorr was absolutely outstanding as our chair in DPZ transition team. You couldn't have had anyone any better. Did you pay me to say that, sir?
Not yet.
But the moderator doesn't get to put their input.
Right, and that's what Carl's
If he has
suggesting,
the
is that we,
history.
yeah. No, I don't feel uncomfortable doing that. Where I see a facilitator helping is to take this amorphous discussion and craft it into something that we can then massage a little further and take forward as recommendations, is actually putting it in that correct form. And also maybe soliciting, making sure that we were hearing from everybody, because I'm not always good at making sure that everybody, Heidi didn't talk tonight at all, because you were hiding there. Making sure that we do hear from everybody, because I think that's important. So we're not hearing a consensus on this facilitator thing.
I do think if you want me to talk, that.
You're the facilitator.
That facilitator is different than what Abby's saying.
Yeah.
Because there's a difference between getting someone from the community college mediation center and an expert that can morph our,
Yes.
content, and, this is, there's a lot here, and you have to have someone who knows these terms, simply, just to start off with, so.
So what do we do?
There were a couple other questions about the structure of the meetings that nobody
Oh,
really
yeah.
talked about at all, and that was the idea of grouping them and the structure of having a discussion one meeting and then follow up with, some research and answers from the staff. Were people okay with that structure? Future meetings?
Yeah, that's fine.
That works.
So it just,
Look at that consensus.
so it comes down to.
Give us raise your hand.
And if I could also, I think that was kind of implied in that, we started to list speakers, but maybe the three of us could get together and just, seeing the list now, we can
Yeah.
figure out who the speakers ought to be to address those issues if we don't have the experts here on the committee, rather than, getting more suggestions. I think we can
And then
probably do
present that to
right?
you all.
Yeah.
One other thing, and go ahead and address this with the public comment form.
Oh, so the public comment
Well-
form, and after looking at it, and kind of the time it's gonna take to do it, we decided to go back to the original recommendation, which is creating an email address and promoting and advertising the email address. So we would create an APFO at howardcountymd.gov, publicize it on the county website. You all could do the same at your discretion, and then we would monitor the responses, giving and reporting out on the types of emails we're getting and the content of those emails, and then the task force can decide to do with that information what they like. So,
Two points.
if every,
One was that it was gonna cost a lot of money to do it. When I heard the figure, I'm like,
I've heard it.
no, I don't think so. So I'm with you on that. And the second thing was Stu has suggested, and I want to get the group's opinion on this, a public hearing. Having a meeting where the public comes and talks to us about
No,
APFO.
thanks.
No.
Would we all learn?
No, thanks.
We might as well not do any of this work.
We're not decision makers, we're just.
We're gonna make a recommendation.
There's a public
They can submit their things to that Gmail address.
And also, remember, this is just an advisory
Yeah,
panel.
we're gonna make a
So
recommendation.
You don't wanna step in front of the formally elected decision-making body.
Right, I mean, we don't have anything to present for people to react to.
Right.
The public would be able to have their voice when the county executive.
Yeah. Either listens to us or doesn't.
And anybody can come to us, yeah.
Can I make a suggestion on the email? Can you give the public the topic so that they weigh in on the topics? Because again, you're gonna get people that say one comment, one person's gonna have one point that they wanna make, and you're gonna have so many emails, and it's off topic.
well, what we could do is, I mean, we could have the email address on maybe with the email address, we link it to the website. That would be the only way I could imagine steering.
Well, I'm just trying to say, if you're asking them for input, ask them for input on the things we're attacking, not the things that we're leaving alone. Like if they wanna talk about things we already feel are adequate.
Have we gotten any communications yet? I mean, via any channel from the public?
Well, we have an APFO website, right?
Yes.
We do.
And we put the agenda on that website before each meeting? So if they go to that, somebody goes to that website, they can look at the agenda, and then there's gonna be Andy's email address on there where they can send a
Oh,
comment.
I
So-
probably misunderstood, I thought you were seeking out the.
Yeah, this is a group incoming, not a group outgoing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is that what it is?
Right.
Okay.
The only natural step is that people are gonna wanna see what comments were submitted. And I did have bad experiences with that with redistricting, where we tried to share the gist of what, and we missed a couple emails, and somebody scraped it from the internet and used it for somewhat fraudulent.
Whoa.
Well, and then,
But you also wanna know who the heck is talking. So it's a
You don't know
balance.
who it is, yeah.
but the other question too is, I mean, when people know who are submitting an email, that their email and who they are may be shared. I mean, that the entire contents of that email may become public.
I mean, in theory.
Just put a disclaimer on it.
Could you do a disclaimer? We could do a
No,
disclaimer.
but within this committee, it's a public meeting.
It doesn't have to be any web server could do an anonymous entry.
Right, so then you get fellow Russians.
Maybe if they care enough, they should come to a meeting and submit the questions on an index card.
Oh, we could do that. We could start having index cards in the back room.
We've got an exhaustive list already.
Yes.
At some point, they've got to
Somebody's
make
got some more.
it, make it
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, and I think I just want to reiterate that we were selected as representatives of the public. You know, everybody here has some kind of background, represents a constituency. There's some reason that each of us were asked to be on this committee as representative of Howard County citizens, and that there will be, and certainly anybody is willing, is welcome to come to the meetings, as some people certainly have done. You know, you can talk to us. If we have an email address available, they can write. I just don't know how we would take, if it became a heavy volume of email, how do we work with that? Well, we've already got 25 opinions here. Do we need to assimilate that?
And how do you respond to them?
Well, we wouldn't.
Yeah,
There would be
somebody's
no
going to
response.
expect a
No
response, and you can't respond to them.
It would have to be, you didn't
should say
respond,
that
did you, Joel?
up front, so people don't get.
That-
peeved.
for-
Yeah, you
When I
did.
read
Yeah.
it,
So-
I agree, you gotta let them know. Yeah.
We tried to digest them a little bit for the board, and actually the committee.
This was for boundary
And then-
lines?
Yeah, and then we would get another email, you didn't correctly portray my point.
Oh.
So it was so hard, it was an interesting experiment.
Yeah, that's what we were worried about. Abby?
I just want to say that, I mean, I said this before, but I want to say it again. I'm a little hesitant about the process of this, that I feel like it's going to become what really should be at the county council level or at the county executive level of people trying to persuade us and doing the public opinion, which is really the testimony that you would give them. And so it kind of really concerns me that, I mean, any person who feels very strongly about an issue can say, I need everybody to write to them about this thing, and then it almost in a way sways the decision versus really using the data that we've been getting from all these different sources in our education. And I'm still hesitant about what that may lead to. And I mean, there are public interest groups that have specific things that they want addressed. And I mean, you get 100 of them and all of a sudden you're like, 100 people wrote to us. Well, how much were we advertising this to everybody versus maybe just a constituency? That's where I start getting some concerns about it. And so, I mean, even if we decide to go with this, I just wanted to express that I'm hesitant about what it may turn into as not being a valuable source in helping us move forward.
Is the expectation that we use the, practically, like, do we plan to do this to use the information or to just give the public the sense that they can voice their
I have a hard time believing the public's gonna come up with a lot
I
of
think it's
things we've
twofold.
already come up with in this group.
I have a school system with many parents that would like to contribute to this. And
Right.
they have to come up to me personally and talk. They would love an opportunity to be able to contribute. And it doesn't have to be answered, and it can be searchable, and it isn't a vote. If you see 300 responses about
That is a
whatever,
vote.
fire
That is a
EMS,
vote. 300 responses is a
It-
vote. That's plain politics, and I don't think we should do that yet. They'll get their chance at the
It's
county council
searchable.
level.
It's just a text file.
It's a vote.
Is it going to persuade your personal opinion on APFO, or will it provide potential ideas that you may want to recommend? You can discount ideas as well. You can discount 100 if they send 100 in a row, but there may be some things.
Stu, you wanted to say something?
Well, I think to let the public in is the way to go. I mean, it's transparency at its finest. You make them feel like they're a part of it. If only 3 people contribute, that's fine, because we have offered the opportunity. Now, to answer the question, to answer them back, that's up to the county.
Okay.
But the thing is that, let's suppose we get 500 responses. Maybe the 499 of them are not good, but that one is so major that we did not take into consideration that it could be monumental for the future of the county.
Where it comes in, Steve's point, that it's a vote, I think where that comes into play is with like a political consideration on the part of the council members. If somebody were to say, hey, council member, you need to vote what we're suggesting because we had 500 people agree with it, and those are people who are gonna be watching you and what you're doing. And in so acknowledging that, I do think that we should still do it, because there's no difference with doing it here or all of us going out and trying to get people to email the council after our suggestions. They're gonna get those too. It's sort of like, that can happen anywhere where somebody's trying to make a notation of how many people supposedly, agree with you or something. And pushing the council to please do X, Y, or Z, right? So why not give the public the notion and
I guess I
feeling
thought
that
the idea
they
was,
can
this group
ask a
really
question
kind
or
of studied
something.
it kind of in depth and tried to negotiate here.
Yeah.
And the public's not gonna have the benefit of that. I mean, they're just gonna start lobbing things in, and so.
But his point was, we don't have to use that to then
I'd
influence
rather
us.
read it.
Unless you feel like, well, we would trust them, just tell us if something was
they're-
interesting,
you guys
we
read
should
that.
hear about it. Thank you.
You guys are checking that unofficial blog every week.
I mean, I don't think we should give people the ability to communicate and not read it, that's not right.
I guess I thought originally the intent of the email was if someone had a question or, wanted to understand the process or lob a suggestion. But if this is gonna become the volumes of email and everybody's cutting and pasting and sending the same thing, then maybe a better way to get public input might be just a Google form, where we have a couple of categories and a couple of questions, and maybe it's even limited in terms of how many characters you can respond and get your idea across. I mean, maybe a little more than a tweet, but that way we could search, we could sort, and then we could sort of categorize ideas. If the intent is to get public input for some ideas that maybe we're not considering.
Well, I guess the question is, do we, as a group, and maybe we have to take a vote on this, because it's not, we got a lot of differing opinions, do we want to solicit public input to what we are doing, to our process right now?
And one of the things that, I'm worried about all the negativity, and I'm sure we all, that's why we're here as a general committee, is that we already have the negative comments that we know in each one of us in our aspects of what we're bringing to the table. What would be better is to hear positive input from the people. Like, if you were on this committee, what would you say would improve the lifestyle of Howard County? Ask them for something positive, because I'm tired of hearing the negatives. It would be nice
We wouldn't
to
be
hear
soliciting anything. It's just, this is a, if you want to make a comment on this, make a comment. It's not like we're going to monitor.
That's my suggestion.
Yeah.
We can ask some specific questions, you know, it's like a survey.
But I mean, you.
But you can ask questions like, what's working well, where do you see the need for improvement, what's.
Do we have to create a web page for that?
It's easy,
Well, yes, we
No,
thought
it
the form
doesn't
was
have
easy,
to.
it was $5,000 to do.
No, it's free.
I think
So this is all free.
generally, soliciting the public is very positive. What they produce, you may have 400 commenting about my bald head. I don't care, but that probably shouldn't be reposted public either. If somebody's listening to your credit card numbers, you may not want that reposted. But we should have the ability to receive all this information from the public, sort through it and make your own informed decisions. And some people, quite honestly, won't read through the 3,000 to 3,000 emails.
Well, that was one of the objections initially, is that we didn't, that people did not want to receive them all. So that means if it goes to Andy or somebody on staff to receive them.
There should be a web portal that we should have access to, which is a read-only access, and people can dump it in the bin. And we'll have to be mature enough to have a thick skin if people start putting junk in there as well.
And it may not be that many, if there hasn't been that many so far, so it could be something that is relatively manageable, and then the committee can revisit it if it ends up being different than what was anticipated.
Yeah, but would you advertise it, like you're saying there's 300 people at your school, would you tell them to all send in comments?
I would love for them to have that available for all of you to see, as opposed to them sending me emails and me having to represent all of them and all their different views. And quite frankly, if you don't agree with them, you can skip over the message and not read it.
But that's kind of go back to our point that we were all appointed, and if you're representing that constituency, then you are the one who's supposed to bear that message, good and bad, not that you agree with it,
I
but bring it
greatly
forward.
appreciate the ability to represent them, but I am not the sole opinion, and I appreciate them contributing. There are plenty of things that are critical to some families that I will not catch in this, and I don't want to have them wait 22 years to get their next opportunity.
Well, they won't. They'll hear it from the county executive, there'll be a public hearing process, there'll be a public hearing process
But
for the
if we don't
county
capture
council.
something in the report, it's
Well, they can
going to
suggest
be
it.
most likely not enacted in legislation if it.
I don't know,
It's
the county
a
council
suggestion.
should listen to the county executive.
Really? There's
One of the members would.
Yeah.
There was one technique we used, it was a lot of
It's
work.
already ninth grade.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
For redistricting, it was a lot of work, but it was effective. It gets to what Patty was talking about, trying to get the more positive content, is we did small group facilitation with information digested by the original committee. So like, once you organize some thoughts and direction, then you get small group feedback on what the committee's already been working on. And it helps to get you away from some of the extraneous comments where they haven't taken the time like we have to go through some of the material. But it does give them a chance to provide some input. It's just more at a top level, like, oh, here's where the committee is. What do you think of these two topics? But it's somewhat managed, so it triggers probably some of the concern you were raising, is that, how much management do you want to bring into the facilitation?
Well, do we want to set up an email address and just make it available on our webpage? Yeah, maybe we need to vote on this, to set up, I should make mention to the chair. What I'm hearing maybe is the idea is to set up an email address that is listed on our website. Just say, without promoting a topic or anything, just say, here's a way for citizens to get in touch with the APFO Review Task Force.
I would recommend that all possible do text entries so people.
We already, that's the one that costs $5,000.
Doesn't cost me that much.
This is overthought, just do it. I mean, just do it.
Okay, and see how it goes.
Individuals use it at personal discretion, whether we choose.
But I would prefer that there was an understanding that it's not there as a lobbying tool, that we don't all go out and get 500 of our best friends to send in a comment supporting, that this is just an opportunity for the public to comment, but not an opportunity for us to,
But like, is there a difference between letting people know it exists and just not asking them to do anything?
Yeah, I think
Like,
you
want people to tell people it
Yeah,
exists.
yeah, I'm just saying, like, if I want the school test to go to 125%, I shouldn't go out and lobby 1,000 people to send that comment in. And I would hope that we all have that understanding, but if someone says they'd like to make a comment about something, then we.
Can I clarify, please, what it is that we're gonna do? Are we saying that there's an email address?
Diane, I need to sign off here.
Okay, thank you.
And then people will email that, and then someone's going to actually.
Someone on county staff, and then share as
And then
appropriate.
we don't have access to that.
Right.
You're going to share general information about what you're seeing.
I would think, if we said, we find a whole bunch of care coming in about schools tests,
Yeah.
that would be significant to bring to the group and say, we had
If you guys are
recommendations,
willing to
this,
do
that,
that
and
work,
that.
and you think that that's something that's logistically okay, I think that makes sense.
I think Andy volunteered for that.
Two things that I wanted to at least point out. I think the first thing is that I feel like there needs to be a disclaimer that everything becomes public information.
Oh, good point.
And without a first and last name, I think that we shouldn't be doing it. And maybe
Identify.
even address to say that they're a Howard County resident.
That's a great idea.
I think that should be something, because anonymous, if you can't put your name behind it, that's a problem. I think second thing is that if we're getting like one strand of the exact same messages over and over and over again, I would like to see it eliminated. Because that to me means that it's being abused, and that's not the purpose of it, is to advocate or lobby on it. And I think that if it becomes that, I'm really concerned that it's not what we wanted it to be.
Okay, and then as soon as we set up the email box, we'll let people know what it is.
Yeah.
So if somebody says, hey, how do I communicate with that group? It will be APFO, RTF,
Right.
at HOCO, whatever.
In the interest of being completely transparent, would it be possible for a member to ask Andy, no offense, Andy, because I know you'll be very appropriate with how you filter the message, but if we wanted to see unfiltered the
He
comments,
could
would we
forward-
have access to that?
I could forward all of them.
I'll do whatever.
Keep in mind,
No, we're not.
we got an audience here of less than a dozen people, so unless something changes and the Baltimore Sun puts out big ads. And even
doesn't work
talking among the elementary schools.
It's not
Big ads don't work.
Was there anything else? So what we'll do is we're gonna take this stuff, digest it, try to categorize it. Oh, the facilitator part. Yay, nay on bringing somebody in from the outside. Okay, how many people believe we should bring in an outside facilitator? You're not hurting anybody's feelings. Counting Grace?
Yeah.
This is gonna be half. How many feel that we don't need that?
Oh, that's right.
-1.
Yeah, minus.
-2.
Minus 2A.
What happened?
We're non-voting members.
Jeff Buff.
Oh,
Take us away.
Forgot I voted.
Yeah.
What'd you have? And what about on the phone?
He didn't want it?
On the phone, do you guys want to vote? They went to bed.
I don't think we need to go there. I don't think we need to.
So that's tied.
Why don't I say I'm willing to go either way?
Oh, that's
I think we need a facilitator to make this decision.
Okay, so for now, we'll put it on hold.
Yeah, it's on hold, let's see how.
We'll see how much we are.
Thanks, you guys.
Somebody was on the table after somebody else.